Emma Lancaster never thought she would see Jason again. But when he reappeared after 7 years, his return marked the beginning of a nightmare she couldn't escape. As Emma dug into his mysterious reappearance, she uncovered a web of secrets that tied him to the chilling disappearance of her best friend, Lily Turner. What she didn't expect was that Jason's past was far darker and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. It had been nearly 7 years since Emma Lancaster had last seen her ex-husband, Jason. The end of their marriage had been messy, a mixture of betrayal, hurt, and regret that neither could shake. After the divorce, Emma moved on with her life. She found a stable job, started making new friends, and even met someone new, Mark, a man who made her feel safe and loved again. She was happy, or at least she thought she was. But then, one ordinary afternoon, Jason reappeared. It wasn't a dramatic moment, not like she imagined in her worst nightmares. He didn't stand on her doorstep demanding answers or call her in the middle of the night. No, he showed up at her office, just like any other person might, as if nothing had changed. Emma was at her desk, working through a stack of paperwork when she saw him through the glass window of her office. Jason, standing in the hallway, his eyes briefly locking with hers before he quickly turned away. Emma froze. She hadn't expected him to show up. She didn't even know why he was there. Their relationship had ended abruptly, and while they never went into full detail about their separation, Emma had long since moved past it. She couldn't say she hated him, but she had certainly learned to live without him. The years of fighting, the emotional abuse, and his erratic behavior were memories she had pushed deep into the past. Emma knew that she loved him, and the scars on his face had been She had never wanted him back, so why was he here now? He didn't approach her right away. Instead, he lingered in the hallway, making a point not to meet her gaze again. After what felt like an eternity, he finally walked past her office. As he did, he paused, offering her a brief, almost emotionless nod. "Hi, Emma," he said, his voice flat, his expression unreadable. She didn't know whether to say something back or just pretend like she hadn't seen him at all. She chose the latter, staying silent and watching him leave the building. For the rest of the day, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had heard rumors about Jason in the years since their divorce, how he had changed, become more withdrawn, maybe even a little dangerous. It was hard for her to believe. Jason was always the charming one, the man with a smile that could disarm anyone. But after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure she could trust her memory of him, and that encounter, brief as it was, only deepened her unease. Days passed and Jason's visits continued. He would show up unexpectedly, in places she didn't expect him to be. At the grocery store, he was there, standing at the end of an aisle as she reached for a box of cereal. When she looked up, there he was, pretending to inspect a bottle of shampoo, the same in the coffee shop, then a local bookstore. He never spoke to her, never made any effort to approach, but she knew he was there. It was like he was stalking her, watching from a distance. Each time, Emma felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something was off. She tried to ignore it at first, telling herself that maybe it was just coincidence. People run into old acquaintances after all. But it wasn't long before she began to feel that familiar, unsettling sense of dread that had marked their marriage. Jason had always been good at hiding his true intentions, always able to slip into the shadows when needed. Now, more than ever, Emma was certain he wasn't just casually crossing her path. There was a reason behind it, and it wasn't good. What exactly did Jason want, and why was he so determined to return to her life after all these years? That question gnawed at her day and night. Soon, Emma began to notice other strange occurrences. Small things. Her keys would be out of place, her phone would go missing for short periods of time, and her belongings would shift around in her house when she was sure they hadn't been touched. It was almost as if someone was moving through her life, quietly, without leaving any obvious evidence, and the only person who could be responsible was Jason. But why? What was his endgame? Emma didn't know, but she knew one thing for sure. Jason's return wasn't a coincidence. Something darker was at play, and it was only a matter of time before it became impossible to ignore. As Emma began to unravel the strange events surrounding Jason's sudden return, her thoughts turned to the past. Those years spent in a marriage that at the time she had believed to be the foundation of her life. Looking back now, she saw the cracks she had once overlooked, the moments of discomfort that, in hindsight, should have served as warning signs. Jason had always been a mystery, an enigma, but she hadn't realized just how much of his life had been hidden from her. Their marriage had started like any other. They had met when they were young, full of dreams and naive optimism. Jason was charming, charismatic, he had a way of making people feel special, and Emma was no exception. At first, everything had seemed perfect, but as the years went by, things started to change. Jason became more secretive, more distant. He often disappeared for long stretches of time without any explanation. When Emma asked about it, he would brush it off with a vague excuse, something about work or needing space. She didn't think much of it at the time. After all, they had their disagreements, their issues, like any couple. But there were moments, brief but chilling, when she caught him in a lie, or noticed him acting in ways that unsettled her. There were strange people who would show up at their house, people Emma didn't recognize. Sometimes Jason would take long walks with them, his voice hushed, his manner tense. When Emma tried to ask, he would dismiss it with a forced smile and a quick change of subject. She chalked it up to his private life, the part of him he didn't share with her. It didn't seem like a big deal, until now. Then there were the nights when Jason would come home late, his clothes smelling faintly of something she couldn't quite place, his eyes glassy and unfocused. The man who had once been full of life, with grand plans for their future, now seemed hollow. But even more unsettling was the pattern of behavior that started to emerge. Jason had a way of getting into people's heads, making them feel like they owed him something. Emma had always assumed it was part of his charm, but looking back, she could see it for what it really was: manipulation. He never raised his voice, never yelled or fought. He simply wore people down with silence, with the weight of his unspoken demands. Over time, Emma found herself walking on eggshells, careful not to trigger his mood swings. But it wasn't just Jason's personality that had begun to feel like a puzzle. There were odd occurrences that Emma couldn't explain. Once, she found a large sum of money hidden in their garage, money that Jason claimed was from a business deal, but he never offered any details. Then, there was the time a strange phone call came, late one night, while Jason was out. The voice on the other end was distorted, barely audible. The only words Emma could make out were, "He's in too deep. He won't get out now." She never mentioned it to Jason, unsure if it was just a wrong number or something more sinister. But looking back, the tone of the voice had been unmistakable. It was a warning, a threat. It was the first sign of danger, the first crack in the facade. As Emma dug deeper into Jason's past, she found even more troubling things. She spoke to old friends, acquaintances who had known him before they met. They told her stories of his wild behavior, his temper, and the rumors of his involvement in things he had never fully explained. It was a side of him she had never seen, a side she couldn't understand. There were whispers about Jason's involvement with dangerous people, rumors that he'd been in trouble with the law on more than one occasion. But those were just whispers, and Jason had always been able to charm his way out of trouble, making sure nothing ever stuck. The more Emma learned, the clearer it became. Jason had always been a master at hiding his true self. He had been playing a game all along, and she had been an unwitting participant. And now, as he reappeared in her life, those unresolved questions, those mysteries from the past began to make sense in a way that terrified her. The Jason she had once known was not the person she had married. He had been hiding something dark and dangerous. The man she had loved and feared was not the same man who had walked out of her life years ago. He had changed, but not in the ways she expected. The more Emma uncovered, the more she realized that Jason's return wasn't just an attempt to reconnect with her. It was a warning, a sign that whatever he had been involved in was far from over. And this time, she wasn't going to let him slip away again. It was late one evening when Emma received the phone call that would change everything. She was sitting at home, curled up with a cup of tea, scrolling through her phone, when her phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something about it sent a ripple of unease through her chest. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Emma Lancaster?" a voice asked, the tone serious and professional. "Yes, speaking," Emma replied, her voice tightening. "This is Detective Harris from the local police department. I'm afraid I have some unsettling news. Your friend, Lily Turner, has gone missing." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Lily, her best friend since childhood, had been part of her life for as long as she could remember. She had seen Lily just a few days ago, laughing over coffee, talking about a weekend getaway they were planning. The idea that she could suddenly vanish was incomprehensible. "What do you mean, missing?" Emma asked, her voice cracking with anxiety. "What happened?" Detective Harris explained that Lily had last been seen leaving her apartment the previous evening. She had told her neighbors she was heading to Emma's house, but she never arrived. No one had heard from her since. Her phone was off, and there was no trace of her at the places she usually frequented. Emma's mind raced. Lily would never just disappear like this, especially without telling her. She had been acting completely normal, and there had been no indication that anything was wrong. The detective assured Emma that they were starting a full investigation. There were no signs of forced entry at Lily's apartment, and nothing seemed to be out of place. The whole thing felt wrong, unsettling in a way that Emma couldn't explain. She asked if there had been any signs of foul play, but Detective Harris had no answers. They were still in the early stages of the investigation. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was somehow involved. She knew it was a stretch, but after everything that had been happening, the strange encounters, the stolen items, his sudden appearance in her life again, she couldn't help but draw a connection. Jason had been acting increasingly erratic, showing up at the most unexpected times. And there was one thing she couldn't forget. Lily had mentioned that Jason had approached her recently, asking oddly personal questions about Emma's routines and whereabouts. At the time, Lily had brushed it off as nothing more than a strange encounter, but now Emma wondered if it was more than that. The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together in a way that made Emma's skin crawl. Could Jason have had something to do with Lily's disappearance? She couldn't fathom the idea, but the more she thought about it, the more the dots seemed to align. Jason had always been manipulative, always good at hiding his true intentions. Emma had seen him manipulate people before, but she had never imagined he could do something like this. Vanish someone from their life without a trace. In the days that followed, Emma became consumed by the need to find Lily. She combed through every detail, every interaction she had had with her friend in the days leading up to the disappearance. Was there anything she missed? Had Lily said something, hinted at something, that could point to why she was taken? The police continued their investigation, but there was little to go on. There were no witnesses, no leads. As Emma's sense of dread deepened, she began to feel the weight of the uncertainty crushing her. Where was Lily? What had happened to her? And most importantly, was Jason behind it all? The more she questioned, the more she realized that there was a part of Jason's past, his darker, more secretive side, that she had never known. It wasn't just the sudden, inexplicable appearances or the missing items. There was something deeper, something far more sinister at play, and Emma was determined to find out what it was, even if it meant confronting her past head-on. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's anxiety grew. Every phone call, every knock at the door made her jump. She didn't know who she was afraid of anymore. The police seemed to be no closer to solving the case, and Jason continued to hover in the background, his presence like a shadow that refused to disappear. The mystery of Lily's disappearance was no longer just a tragic event. It was a riddle that seemed to have no answer, a twisted web of secrets that Emma needed to unravel before it was too late. With every passing day, Emma's fear became more tangible. She couldn't ignore the unsettling thought. If Jason was behind this, what would he do next? The pieces were falling into place, but they were leading her down a path she wasn't sure she was ready to walk. Emma sat in her living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of her thoughts. Days had passed since Lily's disappearance, and the weight of uncertainty hung over her like a storm cloud. The police investigation had stalled. They had questioned everyone close to Lily, checked her phone records, and gone through her social media accounts, but there was no new information, no fresh leads. Emma felt the frustration building inside her. She couldn't just sit around waiting for someone else to find the answers. That night, after a long day of searching for anything she might have missed, Emma decided to revisit some of the old boxes from her attic. She had been sorting through them when she found a folder she didn't recognize, hidden under a pile of old photographs and dusty letters. It wasn't a large folder, but its presence intrigued her. There was no name or label on it, just a plain manila envelope sealed shut. Curious, Emma opened it, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled out the contents. Inside, she found a collection of letters, handwritten ones, not typed. The ink was faint but legible, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. As Emma read through the letters, a sinking feeling settled in her chest. They were from Jason, but they weren't addressed to her. They were addressed to someone named Sarah. The name didn't ring any bells, but there was something chilling about the way Jason wrote, and she hoped it was something chilling about the way Jason wrote. The first letter was dated only a few months before their divorce. In it, Jason wrote about his growing dissatisfaction with their life together, his need for a fresh start, and his plans to move on with someone he called Sarah. He spoke of her in a way that made Emma's stomach turn. There was a tenderness in his words, a sense of excitement, as if he had already begun to picture a future with this woman. He wrote of leaving Emma behind, of starting a new life far away from everything they had built together. But what really sent a shiver down Emma's spine was the final sentence of the letter. "I'll do whatever it takes, even if it means getting rid of her." Emma stopped breathing for a moment. Getting rid of her. The words echoed in her mind, replaying like a nightmare. Had Jason been planning something like this all along? Had he seen Emma as a problem to be solved, a barrier to his plans with Sarah? The letters grew darker as Emma flipped through them, each one revealing more of Jason's obsession with Sarah. In one, he spoke of their plans to disappear together, of cutting ties with everyone, including Emma, and starting anew in a place where no one could find them. There were also cryptic references to clearing obstacles and making things easier, though Jason never fully explained what that meant. Emma began to feel a wave of realization washing over her. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. But it wasn't just Jason's secretive plans that unsettled her. It was the way he spoke about Sarah. It was clear from the letters that Sarah wasn't just someone he was casually seeing. She was someone Jason had been hiding, someone who had a greater hold over him than Emma had ever realized. And now, Emma couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that Sarah might be connected to Lily's disappearance. As she sat there, piecing together the fragments of Jason's past, it suddenly hit her. Sarah wasn't just some woman he had met. Sarah was his half-sister. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she remembered the brief mention Jason had once made about his family. He had always been so private, so guarded about his past, but she now realized that he had been hiding much more than she ever imagined. Determined to get answers, Emma contacted the police and shared her discovery. Detective Harris was skeptical at first, but after a brief investigation, he confirmed that Sarah was, in fact, Jason's estranged half-sister. She had disappeared years ago under mysterious circumstances, and her whereabouts had remained unknown until now. The police had never been able to track her down, and her name had long since faded from their records. But now, with Sarah's connection to Jason revealed, it seemed clear that she had been a part of Jason's darker plans all along. Emma's heart pounded as she realized the full extent of Jason's deception. It wasn't just about him stalking her or returning to her life after years of absence. It was something much more dangerous. Jason hadn't just wanted to reconnect with Emma. He had been planning something far worse. And now, with Sarah in the picture, Emma had no doubt that the two of them were involved in something sinister. With this new lead, the investigation gained momentum. The police began searching for Sarah. But Emma knew it was only a matter of time before Jason and his sister would vanish again, leaving another trail of destruction behind them. Emma had uncovered the truth, but the nightmare was far from over. As the investigation deepened, Emma realized that her life, her safety, was still very much in danger. Jason's twisted game was only beginning, and Emma was determined to stop him, no matter what it took. The tension was unbearable as Emma sat in her car outside the rundown cabin at the edge of town. The woods around her were thick with the heavy silence of the night, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the cabin through the windshield, every nerve on high alert. The police were en route, but Emma knew that Jason and Sarah had a head start. She wasn't sure what exactly she was expecting to find, but she had no choice but to confront the nightmare that had been stalking her for so long. For weeks, Emma had been haunted by the thought that Jason's return wasn't just a random act of desperation. It was a carefully calculated plan. Jason had always been a master manipulator, and now, with the revelation of his half-sister Sarah's involvement, Emma realized how deep his web of lies truly ran. She couldn't wait any longer for someone else to stop them. She had to act. Half-XL it picked. The police had traced the phone records, connecting Jason to a series of burner phones and encrypted messages. It led them to the cabin, isolated, tucked away from prying eyes. Emma had insisted on coming, despite the officer's warnings. She couldn't sit at home waiting for someone else to take control. The disappearance of Lily, Jason's strange obsession with her, and the sinister letters had all pointed to this place. This was where the truth would finally come to light. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped out of the car and approached the cabin. The air was thick with anticipation, every step feeling like it might be her last. She could feel the presence of Jason's shadow looming over her. The closer she got to the cabin, the more her thoughts raced. What would she say to him? Would he try to talk his way out of it, the same way he always had? Or had he really crossed the line this time? How? The cabin door was slightly ajar, just enough for Emma to see a faint light flickering inside. She knew it was risky to go in alone, but she couldn't stop herself. She pushed the door open slowly, her breath shallow, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But there was no turning back now. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Emma's eyes scanned the space, but it took a moment for her to find what she was looking for. There, in the far corner, stood Jason. His face was cold, emotionless, as if he had been expecting her. Beside him, a woman with striking features sat on a couch, her expression unreadable. Emma felt a chill run through her. This was the moment she had feared. Jason's eyes locked with hers, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The air between them was thick with years of unspoken tension, the remnants of a broken marriage, and a dark secret that had finally been exposed. "You shouldn't have come, Emma," Jason finally said, his voice low, almost casual. "This was never about you. It was always about us. You were just in the way." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. In that moment, she realized the full extent of his manipulation. He hadn't just returned to reconnect. He had been plotting this all along, using her as a pawn in a twisted game with Sarah. The life they had built together, the years they had spent in what she thought was a loving marriage, it had all been a lie. She wasn't just his ex-wife, she had been the obstacle that stood between him and whatever sick vision he and Sarah had for themselves. Sarah stood up from the couch, moving toward Emma with an unsettling calm. "You never understood him," she said, her voice icy. "But you will. This is just the beginning." Emma felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly replaced with something else, a cold, unyielding anger. "I won't let you do this," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Just as Jason started to step toward her, the sound of sirens pierced the stillness of the night. Emma's heart raced as she realized the police had arrived. But before she could react, Jason's face twisted into something darker, something more dangerous. "You think this is over?" he sneered. "You're too late." In a split second, Jason lunged toward Emma, but before he could reach her, the door crashed open and the police flooded in, guns drawn. It all happened so quickly. Jason and Sarah were apprehended, their plans finally unraveling. Emma was shaken, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had come to light, and justice was being served. As Jason was led away in handcuffs, his face twisted in a mix of disbelief and fury, Emma felt a strange sense of relief. This was the end of the nightmare that had plagued her for so long. But even as she watched him disappear into the back of the squad car, a thought lingered in her mind. How well can we really know someone we once loved? The truth had been darker than she could have ever imagined, but at least now, she was free. In the days following the confrontation at the cabin, Emma tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Jason and Sarah had been arrested, their involvement in the disappearance of Lily, and several other unsolved crimes, finally exposed. The police had found evidence of a network of dark dealings that Jason had been orchestrating for years, using his charm and manipulation to pull people into his dangerous orbit. It was a relief to know that they were behind bars, but it didn't erase the damage that had been done. Emma found herself reflecting on the years she had spent with Jason, wondering how she had missed the signs. How had she not seen the darkness beneath the surface? The betrayal stung deeper now, and even though Jason's arrest meant she was safe, the emotional scars lingered. Lily's disappearance, while painful, had given Emma the clarity she needed to face the truth. Jason had always been hiding something, and it wasn't just the secrets he kept from her. It was the life he had built in the shadows, a life that had led to manipulation, lies, and ultimately, tragedy. As the weeks passed, Emma tried to move forward, reclaiming the pieces of her life she had lost. She focused on rebuilding her friendships, especially with Lily, who was eventually found safe but shaken, hidden away by Jason's twisted plans. Slowly, Emma learned to trust again, but the experience had forever changed her. The man she had once loved, the person she had believed she knew, had been nothing more than a mask. And though the nightmare had ended, Emma couldn't shake the lingering question: what else was Jason capable of? But for now she had peace. The nightmare was over. The truth had finally come to light, and Emma was free to start anew.